And so, as we fix our eyes forward, I would like to announce also that my resignation as clerk of court will be effective immediately.
Alex Murdaugh is no longer a convicted murderer. In a unanimous 5-0 decision that has sent shockwaves through the American legal system, the South Carolina Supreme Court just hit the reset button on the trial of the century. The man the world watched receive 2 consecutive life sentences for the execution of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, is officially headed back to court. But this isn't just about a legal loophole. This is about a betrayal of justice from inside the courtroom itself, and a court clerk named Becky Hill, who, according to the justices, placed her fingers on the scales of justice just to sell a few books. Today, we are exposing the truth behind this reversal. We're looking at the evidence that was never supposed to be heard, the secret conversations held in jury rooms, and the chilling reality of what happens next. Is Alex Murdaugh walking free, or is this just the beginning of a second, even more dangerous chapter? Stay with me on True Crime Exposed, because the details of this 27-page ruling are more twisted than the murders themselves.
To understand why this case paralyzed the South, you have to understand the name Murdaugh. For over 100 years, they weren't just lawyers, they were the law. Starting in 1920, 3 generations of Murdaugh served as the lead prosecutor for 5 counties. People in the Low Country used a specific phrase: in this part of the world, there's right, there's wrong, and then there's the Murdaugh way. Alex Murdaugh was the 4th generation heir to this power. He married Maggie, his college sweetheart, in August of 1993. To the outside world, they were the first family of Hampton County. Maggie was the devoted mother, the heart of their social circle. They had 2 sons, Buster and Paul. But by 2019, the Murdaugh way began to rot. It started with a boat crash. Alex's younger son, Paul, nicknamed Paw Paw by his father, was driving the family boat while intoxicated. The crash killed a young girl named Mallory Beach. For the first time in a century, a Murdaugh was on the wrong side of a courtroom. Fast forward to June 7th, 2021. The Moselle estate was quiet that night. Maggie had been staying at the family's beach house, but came to Moselle at Alex's request.
Paul was there too. At 8:44:49 p.m., Paul recorded a simple video on his phone of a dog in the kennels. It was a mundane 58-second clip. Less than 15 minutes later, the quiet was shattered. At 10:07 p.m., Alex called 911. His voice was frantic. He told dispatchers he had just arrived home from visiting his sick mother to find his wife and son executed near the dog kennels. Paul had been shot twice with a shotgun. Maggie had been executed with a rifle. In that moment, the world saw a grieving husband. But the investigation that followed would reveal that on that epic night, the 100-year dynasty didn't just end, it was murdered. For 13 months, there were no arrests. Alex Murdaugh even survived a bizarre suicide-for-hire shooting in September 2021, an event he later admitted was a botched attempt to get a life insurance payout for his surviving son, Buster. But on July 14, 2022, the hammer finally fell. Alex Murdaugh was charged with 2 counts of murder. The trial began on January 25, 2023, in the tiny town of Walterboro. It was a circus. For 6 weeks, the world watched as a mountain of circumstantial evidence was piled in front of the jury.
But the prosecution had a problem. They had no DNA, no murder weapons, and no confession. Until the ghost of Paul Murdaugh spoke from the grave. Remember that kennel video Paul took at 8:44 p.m.? For over a year, Alex told police he was never at the kennels that night. He said he was napping at the house. But when investigators finally cracked Paul's phone, they found that video. In the background, clearly audible, was the voice of Alex Murdaugh. The defense was backed into a corner. On February 23rd, 2023, Alex did the unthinkable. He took the witness stand. He admitted he had lied. He blamed his paranoia on a decade-long opioid addiction. He looked the jury in the eye and said, "I would never hurt Maggie or Paul." But the jury wasn't buying it. On March 2nd, 2023, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, they returned the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge, Clifton Newman, didn't hold back during sentencing. He told Alex, "It might not have been you, but it was the monster you become."
But within your own soul, you have to deal with that. And I know you have to see Paul and Maggie during the night times when you're attempting to go to sleep. I'm sure they come and visit you. I'm sure.
He handed down 2 consecutive life sentences. As Alex was led away in handcuffs on March 3, the saga seemed over. The dynasty was dead. The killer was caught. But little did we know, the clerk of court was already drafting a book that would bring the whole house of cards down 3 years later.
As the clerk of court for Colleton County, Becky was the gatekeeper. She was the one who made sure the jury stayed focused, isolated, and impartial. But the South Carolina Supreme Court just confirmed what many suspected. Becky Hill wasn't just watching the trial, she was writing it. You see, Becky had a secret. While the world was watching the Murdaugh family dynasty crumble in early 2023, Becky was busy preparing her own debut. She was writing a book. And according to the justices, she needed a specific ending to make that book a bestseller. She needed a guilty verdict. On May 13, 2026, the Supreme Court highlighted what they called shocking jury interference. Now, let's look back. During the trial in early 2023, specifically on the day Alex Murdaugh was set to take the stand in his own defense, Becky Hill allegedly went into the jury room. She didn't just give them lunch orders. She looked them in the eye and said, "Watch his body language." She told them, "Don't be fooled by his testimony." Think about the weight of that. The clerk of court, the person the jury relies on for everything, is whispering in their ears that the defendant is a liar before he even opens his mouth. The Supreme Court said this egregiously attacked Murdaugh's credibility.
But it gets darker. Let's talk about Juror 785, the woman the internet calls the Egg Lady. On the very last day of the trial, right before deliberations were set to begin, Becky Hill approached the judge with a story. She claimed Juror 785's ex-husband had posted on Facebook that his wife was going to vote not guilty. It was a lie. The post didn't exist. The Supreme Court ruling reveals that Becky Hill didn't just invent the post, she exploited that juror's personal fears. She told the juror that law enforcement was questioning her ex-husband and even offered to help her get a restraining order. It was a tactical strike. She scared a potential not guilty vote off the jury so the verdict she needed for her book would be guaranteed. And the world didn't have to wait long for the truth to catch up with her. On December 8, 2025, just 5 months before today's reversal, Becky Hill stood in a courtroom herself. She pleaded guilty to perjury and obstruction of justice. She admitted to showing sealed crime scene photos to reporters and taking thousands of dollars in illegal bonuses. The justices today were scathing. They wrote, "Hill placed her fingers on the scales of justice." They even mocked the title of her book, saying she was quite busy behind the doors of justice, thwarting the integrity of the system she was sworn to protect. Becky Hill wanted to be a celebrity. Instead, she became the reason a man convicted of double murder just got a second chance.
If Becky Hill was the spark that lit the fire, the financial evidence was the gasoline. In every true crime case, there is a rule that protects you and me from being judged by our past mistakes rather than the facts of the crime. It's called Rule 404B. It says the state can't just stand in front of a jury and say, "This man is a thief, therefore he must be a killer." But during the 2023 trial, the Supreme Court says that is exactly what happened. The justices did something incredible in their May 13th ruling. They actually looked at the clock. They calculated that the prosecution spent over 12 and a half hours spread across 10 grueling days of testimony, talking purely about Alex Murdaugh's stolen millions. They brought in bank managers, defrauded clients, and law partners to tell stories of betrayal that had absolutely nothing to do with the night of June 7, 2021.
Now, look at this from a human perspective. You're a juror. You've been sitting in that box for weeks. You haven't seen a murder weapon. You haven't seen a single drop of blood on Alex's shirt. But for 12 hours, you've heard how this man looked a paralyzed client in the eye and stole her settlement money. By the time you go to deliberate, you don't just think he's a suspect. You hate him. The Supreme Court was blunt today. They said the trial court allowed the state to go as far and as deep into detail as they wanted. They ruled that this unfairly prejudiced the jury. In plain English, the state overproved the thief to convict the murderer. This is the exposed truth the media is glossing over. In a retrial, the prosecution won't have those 12 hours of character assassination to hide behind. They won't have the financial distraction narrative to carry the load. They are going to have to prove, with forensic evidence alone, that Alex Murdaugh pulled those triggers. And without the mountain of financial scandal, the state's case suddenly looks a lot thinner than it did 3 years ago.
So here is the question everyone is asking today. If the murder conviction is gone, is Alex Murdaugh walking out of prison? The short answer, not a chance. While the headlines today are screaming Murdaugh overturned, there is a massive legal safety net that the public often forgets. Alex Murdaugh isn't just a suspect. He is a confessed and convicted federal criminal. Back in April 2024, Murdaugh stood in a federal courtroom and pleaded guilty to 22 different counts of money laundering, bank fraud, and wire fraud. The judge didn't go easy on him. He was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. And that's not all. In the state of South Carolina, he's also serving a 27-year sentence for those same financial betrayals. Let's look at the math from a human perspective.
Alex is 57 years old today. Even if he serves those sentences at the same time, he isn't looking at a release date until he is nearly 100 years old. The South Carolina Supreme Court's ruling today means he is no longer a murderer in the eyes of the law. But it doesn't change the fact that he is a thief who admitted to stealing nearly $9 million from the most vulnerable people imaginable, including the family of his own deceased housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. Right now, as we speak, Alex is sitting in a maximum security cell in an undisclosed location. He's traded his family's dynasty and his designer suits for a prison jumpsuit. And despite today's massive legal victory, his daily reality isn't changing. He's won a major battle, but he's already lost the war for his freedom. The question now isn't when does he get out, but can the state find a jury that hasn't already been poisoned by the scandal of the first trial? Within hours of the Supreme Court's ruling, South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson released a defiant statement. He said that while his office respectfully disagrees with the court's decision, they are already preparing to retry Alex Murdaugh for the murders of Maggie and Paul as soon as possible. But here is the exposed truth. Trial 2.0 will be a completely different animal. The Supreme Court didn't just order a new trial, they issued a warning. They told the state that they cannot repeat the 12-hour financial lecture from the first trial. Next time, the jury won't be flooded with stories of disabled clients and stolen millions. The court explicitly called out the testimony of Tony Satterfield, the son of Murdaugh's deceased housekeeper, saying it had zero probative value for a murder trial and was highly prejudicial. Without the financial scandal to act as a smokescreen, the prosecution has a massive problem. The defense has already fired back, pointing out that there is still no DNA, no blood spatter on Alex's clothes, and no murder weapons. For the state to win a second time, they will have to rely almost entirely on the Moselle kennel video, that 8:44 p.m. recording that puts Alex at the scene just minutes before the killings. But can they find a jury in South Carolina that hasn't already been poisoned by the headlines? Can they find 12 people who haven't heard about the stolen money, the egg lady, or Becky Hill's book? The defense is already calling this decision a victory for the rule of law, claiming that if the system only works for the innocent, it doesn't work at all. So what happens next? Alex Murdaugh remains in his cell, but his lawyers are already filing motions for a 2027 trial date. The dynasty has fallen, the conviction is gone, but the mystery of what really happened at Moselle on June 7, 2021 is officially wide open once again. Whether you believe Alex is a monster
or a victim of a corrupt clerk, one thing is certain: the trial of the century just got a sequel. Thank you for watching True Crime Exposed. If you want to stay updated as we track every motion filed in this new trial, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The truth is still coming to light.